will jetzt hier abspritzen, denn die Frauen gehen einfach nicht nach, dass sie hier wegmähen.
Spritzen Sie die einfach ab?
Ja.
Haben Sie die nicht vorwarnen?
Nein. So, jetzt so, das ist passiert.
Like with any other community, most of us want to see the game we play not only succeed, but excel, even if we dogpile on it way too often. The key for success often relies on constant improvement on the product, although sometimes a brilliant idea never makes it into the development phase. Whether it's brand new or polishing a pre-existing feature, they both share the goal of making the game better. Ain't that right, No Connection? Oh, that's right. Today, No Connection will carry some of the commentary.
Hello, my name is No Connection, and...
Yeah, that's very interesting. Anyhow, I've gone through several communities, and by that I mean a couple Discord servers and my Twitter feed, in order to ask what sorts of improvements people would like to see in the game.
For this video, we've organized the suggestions we consider most interesting from least to most necessary. You know, because it scales the importance as we go along the video. Kevin thought that was interesting. We also have to stress that just because we're discussing these adjustments doesn't mean it's guaranteed in any way that it will be applied to the game. As much contact we have with the developers, they're ultimately the ones that choose what makes it in and what doesn't. Hell, it's not guaranteed they're willing to watch this video in the first place.
One can only hope and pray something actually makes it across. Truth be told, at this point I'm mostly around to see what happens next, but I guess every once in a while you gotta make good deeds for the community, so hopefully this will do. That said, let's begin.
To the average player, this may not seem like a complaint worth their time. Everyone is so used to the gameplay in front of their eyes, but at some point you may realize, holy shit, this is fucking cluttered. The HUD is constantly filled with information of what's happening, such as buffs and debuffs, damage outputs, and effect titles. So what if there was an option of just not showing any of that? Option being the operative word. Some people may appreciate the lack of excess info, while others may prefer to have it to understand what's happening on the spot. There's still critical information that should remain on the HUD, those being buffs and debuffs to accurately judge their length, and critical hits. This last case is tricky since they're inherently attached to damage outputs and still fairly relevant to know when you land one. I guess having some sort of indicator on the top row next to health bars would suffice, but something visible enough that doesn't obstruct the main match.
The addition of custom avatars made one thing clear. People are willing to buy a lot of dumb shit. I mean, some extra flair to the game in whichever way is possible makes the experience more interesting. One of these would be the inclusion of the additional voice packs featuring Second Encore.
You will refer to me only as Your Highness.
How they are meant to be implemented is still up for debate. My personal take landing in a few variants having it depending on palette. That doesn't mean it's the ideal solution, mind you. I'm sure there's about 12 people that would like their Ivy League with a salty voice. Another alternative would be having it as a selectable option in the menus, but it seems unlikely given the devs won't turn a profit by it. Another suggestion that involves a stylization is a brand new player card model. This mock-up by fellow YouTuber FukuaPosting gives a good image of what it could be, featuring the already present top fighters alongside a custom quote, favorite variant, guild info, implying dose release, and whatnot. Granted, a few things would need some extra tweaking. God only knows what people will come up when it comes to custom status. And rather than having a favorite element, it could translate to customizing the background color. Throw in season pass arts for good measure and other pre-existing assets. But for all it's worth, this, alongside voice packs, boil down to mere cosmetics.
Engravings give you no tactical advantage whatsoever.
Not to mention, a menu redesign was teased on the roadmap this year, so who knows if it will involve any of the discussed points.
Well, this one is rather small since I'm willing to bet the vast majority of people simply accept what they see without reading the finer details, because if there's one thing a mobile player can't do, is read. The second one is getting late. In short, there's a few bloopers in some of the ability descriptions, like Wvmpx not mentioning the duration of his buffs, and in the Spanish version, Material Girl doesn't list precision, which could lead to confusion, but most people likely overlooked it. Some of these mistakes are, like I said, small and hard to notice. For years this fat ass Kevin missed the one on Wvmpx, he automatically assumed his buffs lasted 5 seconds and left it at that. For the record, the description may have been changed at some point, but the mistake isn't recent. But there's also cases that aren't mistakes per se, rather could use further clarification. In short, timeless buffs, they're the middle step between permanent and time buffs, usually having no expiration outside whatever the signature ability rules. Occasionally, this could generate confusion as to how long a buff lasts, so a good practice would be to distinguish them from timed and permanent. Just adding the word timeless next to the buff name would suffice.
This is something I and many other people have been considering for a while. Training mode has always been the least touched upon aspect in the game, and for good reason, because its only goal is to help the player try out whatever combinations they want. The thing is, it feels rather empty. You're only given 3 sparring partners with no AI to speak of and a large chunk of health. They're just punching bags, but can actually be killed. That's mostly bothersome when you practice lengthy combos and the sparring partner dies midway. It's even worse if you're trying to get as much damage as you can and miss the critical, making you start over with another training dummy. It's honestly impressive how barren this training mode is when compared to Second Encores, which seems to have settings for nearly anything. That's why at some point I decided to edit a mockup of how a training mode enhancement could look like. It's far from perfect, and it could try to fit other suggestions, like having attack and health modifiers. But at its core, it should allow the player to select which characters they want to face off against, as well as what element they feature. It would also allow granting either the player or the enemy whichever buffs or debuffs they want. They display on a list and let you select who has it, whether it's permanent or not, and how long it lasts. This would instantly solve killing sparring partners prematurely, since you can just grant them final stand and go nuts. Now the reason I don't think is that necessary is because training mode, as bare bones as it is, and as much improvement it can use, is still a completely optional feature. You could spend your entire SGM account without ever touching it, and you wouldn't miss out on anything. But having it resemble something that Second Encore has would be a great thing.
Parallel Realms is a recent game mode added that can be pretty difficult if you're underprepared with a small collection or underleveled moves. But for the game's boomers, it's just another Tuesday.
Of course!
So how do we rework the highest difficulty the game mode offers? Well, make it play like a roguelike and have our choices limited somewhat. Let's say No Mercy forces you to use random fighters from your collection, rather than you choosing your fighters, forcing you to use what you were given. Or you can start with 3 fighters and slowly build up with more fighters while going through more nodes, giving the game an actual challenge rather than artificial difficulty with HP and attack stat boosts. This may be a radical departure from the current version of No Mercy, one which not everyone may enjoy, but it would be a challenge with stakes in exchange for a fat reward, which I guess would need to be increased, you know?
Streak Pity has been a great asset so far, allowing the player to restart from where they fucked up. The first time is cost free, afterwards it costs 25 Theonite only. You may be asking yourself why this even made it into the list. Well, 2 reasons. If you remember a couple months back, a certain individual, who we clearly don't know who it is, exploited this new system and got themselves a new personal best. In other words, if the cash is right, you can abuse this system to your heart's content. Not that a normal person would do it, both in costs and personal respect. Consequently, this partially led to inflated scores, because you can immediately restart from wherever you dropped off and the cost is near negligible. The solution is rather simple, and maybe a hard pill to swallow for some, that being increasing the cost for restoration. It could either be done by mixing the old and new system, as in the first restore is free and afterwards they have a cost according to its streak, or gradually increase the restore price each time it's used. But it should be twice the previous value. It would be less effective if it's just 25 more Theonite than the previous restore.
Alright, this one won't take long. Frankly, I'm surprised and disappointed this needs to be brought up in the first place. Rewards for price fight cutoffs used to be a reliable method to guess where the next price fight would feature its own cutoffs. If Philia's price fight had a 10% cutoff at 80 million, chances are the next Philia price fight would hover around that area. It wasn't guaranteed, of course, that'd be wishful thinking. But it served its purpose as a functional enough guide, and from the beginning of 2024, they stopped updating the forums and other social media where the cutoffs were usually posted. They mentioned the scores would be added in the forums at a later date every other month. Yeah, glad they've been keeping their promise on that one. Good job, guys. Needless to say, the request here is simple enough. Just bring back price fight reports again, coupled with the addition of severely lowered pause for streak restoration. The consequences of hiding them have resulted in score inflation, and it's obviously made worse by the fact that you can't really tell where it's gonna land next time. Your only guides available are already 4 to 6 months old, and asking others how much they've done or plan to. Suffice to say, I can't really think of a reason not to bring reports again, unless it's due to other shit taking priority, but which would partially justify it.
Current Diamond prize fights feature some of the highest fighting scores you can find, 150,000 on average once you get to high enough streaks. This is great for the sake of grinding variants, however a side effect of this was only showcasing a very select few of variants to meet said average. Your chances of finding any of the Diamond Beowulfs, Cerebellas, Big Bens or Black Dahlias is very high. It's at least helpful enough to usually keep obnoxious defenders away. Usually. But it makes the fights more repetitive. The solution would be simple enough, just allow a wider score average so more teams can show up above streak 50. I say simple, but the clear drawback would be missing out on XP rewards, and potentially showcasing more complex defenses. It's a complicated matter of which aspect to prioritize. At the same time, if you can make a drinking game out of how many times you can find Angelluzo in prize fights, maybe it's for the best that it changes for the sake of fresh defenses.
Recently I have dipped my toes into some other gachas and noticed something SGM rarely has, which is events. And no, I'm not talking about the prize fight monthly event. What I'm talking about here is there would be a random event with basically a side story of the cast with rewards and a minigame different from the base game. Many other gachas have this kind of style of events, which I really like, and it makes the game less tedious, giving the player an interest and incentive to keep playing. A brief example I'll give is Nikke. Okay, yeah, I know I'm already getting booed at, but please just hear me out. Every 20 days they will have an event related to a new character that is dropped with their own side story of things and their respective minigame. Usually some of these are rip-off versions of other famous games like Bloons Tower Defense, but on a smaller scale and to the style of Nikke and its cast. So it would be a good addition, so add it, I don't know.
Balance has been a subject of constant discussion and ridicule. There's many variants that need some sort of improvement, the most notorious cases being both Diamond Cerebellas, Terrorbite, Untouchable, Ultraviolent, and many others. Some will say Silvers also deserve that treatment, and I could see it in the most egregious cases, but I think it's fair to leave Silvers and Bronzes mediocre. Most of them are meant to be just that by default. Other cases could actually use a nerf of sorts. Windswept is the primary contender for some toning down. She has the fastest and easiest permanent precision gain, coupled with Philia's already overpowered kit, so reducing her means of gaining it by any means would help. Although with the current meta dominated by the likes of Immoral Fiber alongside Corrosive Element, it's a double-edged move. Furthermore, some people believe Unholy Host and Deathwish are still incredibly powerful and also deserve a nerf of any kind, like getting rid of the buff removal on the former, or having the latter's buff steal and hex only work in offense. Whether the overall majority agree with reducing this variant's strength is ultimately up to debate. I will say, part of why these two are usually maligned is a consequence of having very obnoxious defensive moves. Tongue Twister in Umbrella's case, and Girls Night Out in Black Dahlia's. The problem with these isn't so much the effects they feature, rather they're difficult moves to defend against, and the AI is quite trigger happy with them. Tongue Twister is a command grab that covers a large portion of the stage. If you're within its radius, then that's a heavy chunk of health lost. Girls Night Out is potentially worse, because it gives the illusion you can fight back against the bunnies, but it's only a facade. Chances are, if you try to attack at any point, you'll get hit by them. To add insult to injury, Black Dahlia's tier 3 is fully actionable during this move's duration. And worse yet, her marquee No Time to Die grants her haste, meaning she'll charge both of these very quickly. So you know, make the AI use them less. I mean, Fukua and Nani never use their respective guard-breaking moves. I think it's only fair to tone it down in these situations.
Look, I know this was in the recent patch notes and it's in development, but we can all agree despite how many assholes this game has in its lore, like this annoying ass kid being the chosen one, or how Dahlia managed to kill Eliza with incredible plumbing under her floorboards. Like, okay, seriously, I love this old hag, but there's no way in hell she won that! How? How? Anyway, it's pretty clear that most people would love to see more story-wise of the cast. The main story of SGM has been halted for a ludicrous amount of time. Though many of you will be thinking, isn't the webtoon supposed to do all that you asked? I mean, yeah.
I'm not reading that!
But it doesn't really matter where or how it's done. It's content that's desired in general by the audience. The only problem is, usually it gets cleared within a day by most people with good collections. An understandable worry, but we believe that story mode deserves more than what it has been left with. Hell, it would be a great way to expand the lore for several characters. God only knows what Eliza's entire motivations are. No, seriously, she bad as fuck, but we don't know what's going on in that fucking crazy head of hers, you know?
Double XP events would be really beneficial for the growth of beginners, or those who played for a long time so they can get more rewards to further grow their arsenal. This can either happen frequently during weekends, since mostly everyone is free during those, or set on a certain date. Also, when was the last time we saw Holodeck Mayhem? It was a small change to Holodeck, but at least gave players a fat chunk of XP. It would be advisable to change the frequency of that too, maybe have it show up once every 2 weeks or something. However, don't take the double XP event suggestion too literal. Instead, it could be considered an event where rewards are essentially doubled, like Theonite, Canopy coins, moves, or any other form of currency this game has. In hindsight, this helps newbies and veterans with their collection of fighters, making the grind process less tedious, which many of us would love, even those that spend hard cash.
Everyone and their grandma knows how bad Big Band is. His kit is beyond outdated and it only offers stuns and bleeds, and the occasional armor. His combo count is possibly the highest in the game, but he's more oriented towards defense due to his marquee abilities being soloist and frontman, both benefiting from whether Band is alone, or he's more tanky with a group. Anyway, how can we make him good, or at least viable enough for him to at least return to Rifts? For one, you have to rework the moves. Stun and bleeds will not take you anywhere nowadays, not unless it stacks on quick and long-lasting fashion. Perhaps we can have one move to have Deathmark, since not a lot of units carry Deathmark in their kits. But for mobile or meter control could also be a decent enough fit. Fuck it, let's go full offense, since why do we have these high combo count moves that hit like a 5-year-old with a sock'em bopper? I won't be going over every single variant rework since that's another can of worms and these are merely suggestions simplified for a better overview of what the community wants or is needed. Also, I don't know if we can make this script that long and just talk about Band. Well, I figure Melon could. Also, on a side note, we should also consider Painwheel and Peacock to be added into a list of rework variants, but that's up to HBS, we don't know what's going on over there.
It should go without saying, but the whole point of gacha is ultimately reaping its rewards, so you can shamelessly show them off later. Getting to most of these tends to be a hassle in its own right. As previously discussed, price-fed inflation has caused its highest rewards being less accessible, which makes it so the only reliable source of diamond keys is more obnoxious to aim for. We already discussed how bringing back weekly score reports should partially address the issue, as well as adjusting the strict pity system. But if that doesn't prove sufficient, then the only alternative is to make keys a guaranteed reward in the form of a threshold goal. Granted, it's still likely scores remain in the high, because of how usually valuable coins and relic shards are, but at least people would be able to more reliably invest diamonds thanks to easier key acquisition. Speaking of shards, everyone hates the current RNG, but some of us are dead focused on getting specific units, and usually it comes at the cost of our luck or cash. Most gachas would have a pity system of sorts, such as tickets you can cash in and get said unit if you didn't pull them in your rolls. The simplest way I can see the devs going about this is using the relic shards whenever a new character is announced, like the Black Dahlia or Maurice shards from several months ago. On a side note, straight up buying the unit of your choosing would be also another great feature too. Sure, this should and will hurt your pockets somewhat, but it helps both the players and the dev team. One last thing in terms of additional rewards, Apexless YouTuber Garzas Negras came up with a concept for collection rewards. It functions similar, if not identical, to accolades, where once you collect every variant from a specific category, you get to reap its rewards. And these should be plentiful, because you just don't know how long it may take you to get someone, but much like accolades, this has a time limit of sorts. If you somehow manage to get everyone in the game, then there's nothing left to get. Sure, at that point, having even more variants becomes redundant and pointless, but it's still a one and done system. I wouldn't mind seeing it though.
As of today's, SGM is completely PvE content. You might be saying that I'm lying. However, when was the last time anyone tried PvP? The two biggest problems would be its unstable and inconsistent connection between two players, as well as no one playing it, since it doesn't reward you with anything. Wait, hold on. It does reward you with something. Mission points. The sole exception to this are those that play tournaments, but those are usually outside of the game. So how do you improve on something though you know no one is going to play it? Giving any sort of reward for starters would be a great headway, but that conflicts with the pre-existing ping issues, which may not be particularly easy to fix. The best way would be to start on a small scale, but not too small, to the point it's worthless, like you won't convince anyone to play PvP if all they get is 50k coins. At the same time, given all the ping matter, it wouldn't be healthy to force players to struggle through the lag for 300 Theonite, or something similar.
You knew this was coming, I knew this was coming, Noko knew this was coming, but only because he read the script. Rifts have been under constant scrutiny for a very long time because of its balance struggles, as well as trying to remain a fresh game mode. In some respects, I think bringing back the old Rift format wouldn't be a good idea. Part of the appeal of the current one is being much more lenient in terms of when to play and who to play against. Not to mention, both share the same flaw. It's a very repetitive game mode with no easy solution for it. Of course, further balancing of catalysts is a great help, but it's only temporary. Most people already got used to spotting several corrosive elements and crippled deckers, and a few of them managed to consistently counter both. The same would go for tossing new catalysts into the mix. While helpful to expand the meta, it's only a matter of time until it becomes stagnant again. That is, unless some dark magic is performed and every catalyst is equally balanced and powerful. Which ain't happening, and not for a lack of trying, mind you. Another idea for rifts would involve random modifiers instead of preset ones. That would give the game mode a more chaotic vibe, but outside of development logistics, this could potentially prove annoying enough because you just never know what to expect for next week. It could likely be a bunch of easy modifiers, but the same could be said for obnoxious ones. But the safest approach would likely be applying weekly ban lists for rifts. The idea is simple enough. A series of 3 to 5 variants cannot be used. 5 for offense and 5 for defense. That's it. It should at least alleviate the abundance of the same attackers and defenders being constantly used. Although it would force the player to invest in more things, just so they have plenty of options available. At the same time, ban lists should try to ensure that bases can still be beaten with the absence of certain variants. Particularly these 3. It definitely requires careful execution, but I can see why it was a popular concept. As to whether make it randomized or community voted, that's a good question. One last thing, being able to fight your own base to get a feel for its performance would be a great addition. I don't really have much else to add. It's self-explanatory as to why it'd be good. It's literally Rift training mode, so yeah.
Well, I guess that's all we had to say.
Or at least all we gave enough of a shit to talk about.
Yeah, true enough.
I'll be honest for a second. Despite all these problems, big or small, the game somehow manages to hold up rather well. It's ultimately thanks to having a strong foundation of base gameplay. But at the same time, it's been given the ultimate privilege. An extremely loyal fanbase. And of course, those that sank way too much time and money want the game to succeed, even if sometimes their way of expressing it comes across as hate for the game. Needless to say, I guess I got somewhat motivated for this project. A project whose ideas may not come to fruition, but at least I get ad revenue for this shit. Any closing thoughts, Noko?
All in all, this game well before mobile was a passion project, and we can all agree we're all passionate in our own unique ways when we play this game. It can be something small like reaching level 70 or getting your favorite diamond. Or it can be to push yourself past your limits and seeing what's theoretically possible, like the Sisyphean journey of 1000 wins. In hindsight, despite how much we shit on HPS, we want this game to thrive because its cast is pretty good. Well, it may not be the best, but we like our hooligans. To say the least, I wouldn't be in this joint project if I didn't have passion for this game. The community is small but plentiful. With that said, thanks for watching.
Hey, wait a second. I seem to have missed another suggestion.
Wait, oh shit, for real?
Yeah, apparently Daisy Mel's here is asking for 10 billion Theonite.
Are you going to do that?
Nah, I couldn't be asked to do it. I mean, I can, but I'm not motivated. I'll just post this image of Reina Higurashi to make up for it and end the video here.
Fucking hell, why are you like this?
That's a good question.
Spanish is just such a charming language. Like, whenever I would watch like Spanish movies or Spanish shows, it's so smooth.